Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette. As we do every week, a brand new guest telling their story in the world of martial arts. And a very special guest this week. This is kind of a family name in the world of martial arts, if you follow it closely. His father actually founded Century Martial Arts Supply over 40 years ago, which is kind of cool. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But he's currently the vice president of Century and the president of Black Belt Magazine, which I'm sure most of my listeners have probably read a few times. I know I have a few hundred magazines laying around in boxes and stuff that I've been collecting since probably the mid 80s. But I'd like to welcome to the show today, very special guest, Michael Dillard. Thank you, sir, for being on.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm happy to be a part of the show.
Cool. So kind of as we do with all my guests, I know it's a little different with everyone, and I know with your father's background on martial arts, I'm assuming that has something to do with it. But just talk a little bit about your kind of first exposure. Did you have a choice to get involved in martial arts? Was it something your dad started training you out of the womb, or just kind of talk about your beginnings in martial arts and kind of how that started?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely got involved at a very early age. I think I was 4 whenever I started taking my first Taekwondo class. You know, my father, even though it's a very important thing in our family to be a black belt, he was very patient with me. I think every martial artist has their own martial arts journey, if you will. And for me, I was involved kind of as a child, like a lot of us are. We were thrown in there. I went through, I think I made it to my orange belt before I had my first kind of disruption with another sport whenever I was younger, and picked it back up and throughout the years. But we have a running joke here at Century and in my family. I was the longest brown belt because it took me about 17 years to get all the way to my black belt. So I was
really
made sure that I did it right. And my father put me through the ringer to make sure that, you know, I earned the respect that he had earned to get his black belt. And I went through several different iterations of schools and instructors and kind of formats and everything that comes with becoming a black belt these days, and the different types of martial arts to finally get mine. Just and it's only been about 5 years ago I finally got my real black belt, if you will.
Okay.
But I was training every day. I just we decided to hold off on the test until it was the right time.
Well, you got me beat. I was a red belt for about 12 years before I finally got my black belt. No, not for lack of trying. I actually had tested one time and then took about a 10-year break when we got married and started having kids. So it's got me beat by about 5 years. So not bad. But, so then at that age, you kind of took some breaks and stuff. What made you want to get back into it? I mean, obviously you were just around it your whole life. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But what was about it that you enjoyed that made you want to keep coming back to it?
Yeah, for me, martial arts is something that nobody can ever take away from you. You know, it's something that's a skill set that you can practice when you're 4 years old. Although it's always at different levels and different degrees of practice, but you can do it when you're 4 and you can do it when you're 90. And I think that's what is really special about martial arts. And I never really stopped training. You know, I would take pauses and go in. But even, you know, when I got my brown belt, this joke began, but it was because I specifically didn't want to test for my black belt until I felt I knew everything up, down, left, right, and had, you know, gone to enough tournaments and gone out and kind of trained with a lot of my peers and things of that nature, because I never wanted my black belt to be a give me. But I think that it's important for everybody to have their own kind of journey, if you will, when you do martial arts. And it always keeps me coming back because it's an endless trove of learning. I mean, if you really do show up with the mentality that you can learn something new every day, then you'll find that you're always picking up little bits and pieces of even techniques and things you've done for years. You always just learn a new way to look at it, or maybe a new little piece of it that you didn't know. And I really enjoy that about martial arts. It always keeps me coming back.
Nice.
And I do all different styles too. So I try to pick up different things in every area. And I think if you start to learn different styles, you can start incorporating that into whatever you would call your main training.
Right. And I definitely want to touch base on the multiple styles too. But first, now you mentioned your first style was Taekwondo. Was your father your first instructor, or I know some parents that are instructors don't want to train their own kids, and it's kind of.
Yeah, exactly that. I went to a local school here in Oklahoma City. Man, it was so long ago. I can't even remember who it was with. Quickly, I've been through 3 or 4 different schools here in our local area, people that we're affiliated with and associated with, and I've had the luxury of kind of we have a facility. We actually have a gym inside of Century Martial Arts Factory. Nice. It's kind of a carved out little area. It used to be where we used to shoot DVDs back when DVDs were a thing. We did a lot of content, and we decided to change it and hold free classes for all of our employees. Oh, wow. And so I've always called that my kind of home gym. But whenever we have these different opportunities, whether it be the Martial Arts Super Show or traveling to meet with our customers, I try to take those opportunities to put myself in their schools and learn from them and train there as well. So I've had multiple instructors. My father is definitely who I would say my true instructor has always been. Okay. But I've had the opportunity to train under a lot of different people.
So do you consider yourself having a core style, or is it more just kind of a blend?
Taekwondo is definitely my core style. My father is with Chuck Kundo, so Chuck Norris system. I believe now it's changed it's just called the Chuck Norris system. Right. I've learned a lot of theirs. I haven't tested yet in their black belt in their curriculum. It's quite the stringent, different set of protocols that you have to do in order to get your black belt in their system. That is something I hope to get to, and it's got a lot of Tang Sudo kind of mixed into some elements of it. Right. And we train that a lot here at Century as well. My father's black belt in Tang Sudo. And then I've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 10 years now. I'm a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. Okay. And then when I was in college, I boxed for about 5 years.
Oh, cool.
I had a couple fights as a boxer. And then I've done Hapkido for a little 3 or 4 year stint, a school that I was doing Taekwondo at just so happened to teach Hapkido as well. So I picked up that class, did it for a while. And then I've also did about 3 or 4 years in Judo, although I don't like to keep my rank going. It was more to fit into my kind of arsenal of other martial arts styles I was doing. And then I had my first MMA fight about a year ago, just before the pandemic COVID situation started to play out.
Well, I definitely want to ask about that, but first kind of go back to the boxing. So obviously as martial arts, I'm sure you did normal, point tournaments and stuff like that, going through the ranks when you were younger. What made you decide to actually want to step into a boxing ring?
There's a guy named Pat Burris. He was on the USA Judo team. He has he's very prolific in the judo community, and he trains a lot of Olympians, the people that kind of go through the Junior Olympics and then also compete to try to be in the Olympics in judo. And he's right here in Oklahoma City, and our local college, so OU, is where I went to college, and his gym is just right around the corner. So out of opportunity, I started training there. They happen to have a boxing program as well, and I just really fell in love with boxing. It was very much outside of anything that I've ever done growing up in Taekwondo and, like I said, the point fighting world. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got hooked on that, and I grew to really like my coach. And so it's just kind of, for me, I was a creature of habit and kept coming in there and learning more and more. And while I was kind of the whole time I was at my university, I really took up the opportunity to learn a lot and dive deeper into that different style, because it is very different in the way that they approach everything.
So did you ever do any of like the sport karate tournaments, something like the Battle of Atlanta, Diamond Nationals, things like that? Was that ever your kind of tournament scene, or was it a little more traditional?
I never made it to those. So I guess the more official tournaments here in Oklahoma, we have versions that, every state has their local type of tournament. So I've definitely competed in my fair share of point fighting tournaments. I just haven't made it to the realm of, being ranked and things of that nature. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I think my prime would have been in high school, and I'm very grateful. My father, he allowed me to try my hand at some more traditional type of sports as well. So I was a state championship track runner and a state championship football player in high school, and those kind of took away from probably my prime of being able to compete in some of the point fighting world. And I have to say, admittedly, that's one of my biggest regrets, I think, as a martial artist. I wish I would have tried my hand while I had the time on my hands in high school to go and to attempt participating in a lot of those.
Yeah, I know. I have a junior in high school right now, my son, who kind of the same thing. He stepped away from martial arts because he got involved in cross country and track and Nordic skiing and everything else. So he's kind of taking a break from martial arts right now. So yeah, hopefully he'll get back to it, when he a little later in life or whatnot. Hopefully he'll miss it.
It's one of those things.
Exactly. So
like you look back and you're like, man, I had a lot of time I could have been competing. I wish I would have been doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you got to come to work every day and make a living for your family. So.
That's right. So let's back up a little bit now, kind of to like your childhood. Now, at what age did you kind of start realizing like kind of how important Century was? I'm sure as a kid you probably spent some time there, when your dad was there and stuff. What are your kind of early memories of Century Martial Arts and kind of what was going on there back in the beginning of it?
Yeah, so Century's it's always been where Dad worked for a long time. I mean, that's always what I considered it. I have happy memories of here. And I'm at Century right now, and walking around the halls and seeing it grow kind of before my eyes. But I always had a different perspective, right? So I was always, like I said, it was where Dad worked. I didn't understand profoundly how important it was to the martial arts industry and the role that we play in just making sure. I mean, there's a lot that goes into getting the products to people and helping support the industry from a business perspective of martial arts school owners and helping them get new students and keeping that alive. And it didn't really come to fruition for me until some of the more prolific martial artists started showing up here a lot more. Guys like Chuck Norris, for me, he's like Uncle Chuck. He was just it was really cool when one day Walker Texas Ranger came out, and I was like, oh, there's Uncle Chuck. He's on TV now. That's interesting. He was just hanging out with us a little bit ago. But guys like that were just that was a different world back then. In the 70s, martial arts was very new to the United States, and it was the hot thing, and we kind of all gravitated towards Century, and we were able to work together with high level martial artists like him and Bill Wallace, Herb Perez. I mean, all these guys, as they started coming into the ecosphere of Century, I realized, oh man, this is a big deal. And as I got older, it really started to click and to make sense. And so I'm very fortunate, and I have a lot of respect for what my father and this company is built and the role that it plays.
Nice. Well, you mentioned Bill Wallace. If I remember when we're done recording, you have to have me tell you my Bill Wallace story. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Okay. So I do love Bill. He's got quite the personality. So
yes, and you'll love the story. So it's kind of funny. So thinking about, you mentioned like the room you're in is where they recorded like DVDs and stuff back when DVDs were huge. What are some of those cool experiences? Were you ever there when they were recording some of those when you were younger, and some of those martial arts you got to actually see creating those videos? That must have been kind of cool.
Yeah, for me, it was probably the timing of my life too. When MMA and when UFC and all these things started coming to fruition and being a bigger part of kind of martial arts, and really when it was like the UFC 1 days, when it was the style versus style type of fights, Frank Shamrock and some guys like that were coming through here, and some people may not even remember who that is, but Hoist Gracie. I mean, all these guys were here and they were filming. I just thought I was like, I've never seen anything like, just like everybody else was, but it was happening like in the room next to me. I was like, I've never seen anything like this. What are these guys doing? And for me, that was really cool to see, quite literally, the evolution of martial arts. And, MMA has its place. There's a whole nother debate about where that fits in the bigger picture, but just seeing the evolution of that stuff happening in the, right here, it's kind of cool to poke your head in there and be like, as a little kid, say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that guy's here. Or even a year later being like, that's who that guy was. He's famous now. That's weird. So
that's cool. Yeah, I know. For me, it was just going to some of the tournaments. Even when I wasn't competing, just watching friends compete in the early '90s and seeing people like Bill Wallace and Benny the Jet just walking around signing autographs. I think the big one for me, the first big tournament I went to was the Diamond Nationals in Minnesota in like 1990 or 91. And at the time, it was right after the Ninja Turtles movie came out, the original one. And the guys who were actually in the suits doing the fight scenes, like Ho Sung Pak and Ho Young Pak, and those guys were all there. And of course, I was, at the time, like a 16 or 17-year-old kid, so I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
No, I think that's really unique about martial arts too, and I hope it always stays this way. And I try to explain to people, especially now I think they notice this UFC stars, but it still is, Bill Wallace is just as important as Bill Wallace has ever been. Because I think that even if you ask a John Jones or a UFC fighter of that caliber, they know who Bill Wallace is and they watch some of his films and things like that. But something about the martial arts, martial artists, they're extremely accessible in that they are not, LeBron James, or they're not this superstar athlete that you can't just, they're not almost not human, because they're just like, where do you even see them? Do you go there? But you can just go to a gym where these guys train and they're quite literally there. And average people walk in and they participate at those gyms all the time. Somebody happens to live in Albuquerque, they may train with John Jones every day or see him at the gym every day just because they happen to go to Greg Jackson's gym there.
Yep.
So it's and at tournaments, you'll obviously, the guy that wins the tournament, he's just walking around. I mean, he's just like every one of us. It's not this unobtainable 1% make it to the top world. They're very accessible, real people that quite often are very willing to train with you, and certainly always happy to have fans.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, I would agree for the most part. There's one or two, I can probably count on one hand the number I've met that were kind of jerks, but for the most part,
yeah.
I know everybody couple, like UFC guys, that I'm not Brock Lesnar. I'm not going to mention by name, but that were maybe not the nicest people when I met them. But for the most part, I've met some amazing people in the martial arts and in all aspects. I actually used to judge MMA too. I judged over 1,000 MMA fights in 3 states, and and got to meet some pretty cool guys that way too. And it's really cool. I do enjoy it, so it's nice. But curious, what was your first job at Century?
Oh man, cleaning the bathrooms 100%.
So you literally started from the bottom. That's good though.
Oh man, I've been through the rigor here, but and I try to stay humble in that regard. But man, my dad made me. He put me through the ringer here. I remember there's a thing in Oklahoma. There's this place called the Tree Farm. Everybody used in high school, they would be, I got to drop the Tree Farm, and it was great. You get to hang out with your friends all day, and I was, I'm gonna work for Century. I kind of have to, but sure, it'll be a good job. And I got there. And bathrooms overflow you got to go grab the shop vac. And did you get your hepatitis B vaccine? Okay, you're gonna have to get that because put your gloves on. You got to go clean this up. And then I got to do maintenance, which meant in Oklahoma, 110 degrees up on the roof, fixing the air conditioners all summer long.
Fun.
And then spent 2 years in our warehouse, a year in our manufacturing. So I've done about a year of every one of our departments that kind of make up our organization. But it's been an exciting journey. I'm glad that I did all the things I did, but I'm certainly glad that some of the things I did at a younger age than now.
Right. So what has been your favorite position you've held there? It's been the most fun.
I was a product manager, which is what we call that position of really creating products. And so some things that I helped create, certainly nothing is ever created on your own, so I can't take credit for all of it. But we have a product line called Sea Gear, which is now used for point fighting. I created that. And then I also had a hand in bringing some of our jiu-jitsu items up to par with what currently is out there now, back when jiu-jitsu was becoming a bigger deal in the early 2000s. Those were two things I would like to do. But being a product manager and actually going out there and seeing what all of us as martial artists are interested in, what we're using, and then trying to create things to help us either instruct better or be better students or have a better experience overall in participating in martial arts, that's a really cool job to be able to have. And it's kind of something that's special. So I have a lot of respect for our team that works up there and does that.
So what type of research is involved in the job? And do you just get to essentially travel to schools and talk to as many martial artists as you can to find out what's needed? Yeah,
we definitely do a lot of talking to as many schools as we can. That's a big research part of it. I think the coolest part of it is probably we have a lot of samples and it's, some stuff is by request. We'll reach out to somebody, hey, that's really cool. Can you send us one? A lot of people send us stuff in hopes of, hey, I have a great idea. Can I send you something? But all that stuff does make its way here. And we actually have 2 gyms here in our facility, and everything we get, we never just cast something to the side. We always put everything to the test. And we have our entire martial arts kind of internal school bang on it and see if it's got a good purpose or if it fits. Or, often we even create our own things and try to break it as much as possible that's a really cool, unique thing that probably not a lot of people get to see or realize that we do. But it's very important to us that before anything ever hits the market and martial artists are using it, that at least our internal martial arts school has done that. And so that's where a lot of the research is for us, is the hands-on, actually seeing it, touching it, putting it to use, seeing if there are other ways to come up that you can use things. That's probably the best research we can really do.
That would be fun. So how did the relationship with Black Belt? When did Century buy Black Belt magazine?
So it's been about 3 years, 4 years, and it's interesting enough. We actually did not, us having a part in Black Belt has kind of always been a dream. Century was actually really founded, or a lot of the success was thanks to Black Belt. My father used to use every dime he had to try and get a advertisement in the kind of the back page listings of Black Belt, and those were the only advertising dollars he ever spent as the company was going. And so I think that added to the success of the company in the long run. But then how it kind of came to be was the company that had previously owned Black Belt magazine was a fitness kind of conglomerate of media properties, and they thought Black Belt would fit into a lot of their other fitness titles. And as we know, martial arts is not like other fitness. It has a lot of different aspects and unique elements to it. Right. And so I think that they didn't necessarily understand that whenever it was under their bigger business, but nonetheless, it wasn't working out for them, and they were actually going to shut Black Belt down. And one of the executives just so happened to be a martial artist, and he kind of raised his hand and said, guys, I think this maybe makes some people upset in the martial arts world. Maybe we should double think this before this blood's on our hand of having shut down this long-standing magazine. And he said, I think I know one company that may be interested in it. Let's at least give them a call. So this person, they called us, and completely out of the blue. And we were like, yes, absolutely. You guys cannot shut that down. So we were able to kind of come to terms to a deal with them and took it under our wings. And it seems like an obvious, Century and Black Belt, but the two very different organizations and what they're trying to achieve. And so that's why I'm the president of Black Belt. But what that really means is, I had to help grab that as an organization and help it kind of plug it into all the different elements of our company to make it work. So the distribution and getting content and filming and the writers, all that kind of stuff brought into our little ecosphere and try to get it working again. And there was definitely, it wasn't in the best shape whenever we got it, but I think it's improved now dramatically, and we have a good vision for the success of it. So it's become a big part of our company.
So can you share any of the possible plans for the future and some ideas you have for Black Belt? Or
yeah, I can show you some of just like everybody, it's no secret that magazines these days it's not an industry everyone's excited to. They're not like, hey, let's go start a magazine company in 2021. So however, that being the case, it's been from the minute we got it, we told ourselves, people know this is a magazine, and we're not going to be the ones to stop that, because as you mentioned in the beginning, that there's so many people that collect these issues. Yep. And they really are kind of like a chronicle of the history of martial arts, especially in America, and where it's at. And if you take one cover, that may not be representative of that decade, but if you really look at it as a whole, it's got these snapshots of what's going on in the martial arts world, back to the first ever when Bruce Lee actually got introduced, and it wasn't even Bruce Lee, it was about Kato and the Green Hornet. And that's just an era within itself. And you look now, it's got this hybrid of all these different martial arts and MMA and that role and karate and traditional and karate making the Olympics. So there's a lot of, it's very important to us that we have a physical magazine always present. However, we are springboarding it and trying to make it into a platform that people can go to for content that's all things martial arts. And a lot of that means video. So we're trying to position it in a way to do streaming and help shed the light on events and other things like that in our martial arts industry that sometimes doesn't get the recognition that it might otherwise deserve from outlets like the ESPNs and the CBSs, those of the world. Make sure that we're still covering all the different types of martial arts that are out there and doing so and bring it to light as a platform for people to go to watch that stuff.
I know. Thinking back to, I was trying to remember the very first issue of Black Belt I bought. It would have been in the mid to late 80s. I don't remember who was on the cover, but the only thing I remember for some reason is one of the advertisements inside was Chuck Norris selling like these stretch or flex jeans.
Oh, yeah, the kicking jeans.
Yeah, the kicking jeans. I still have that issue somewhere.
We brought them back to life like 2 years ago against my advice, but they actually ended up, they connected with people, I guess.
Oh, I did not know that. That's funny.
Yeah, but hey, those were the heydays. I mean, it was like martial arts was so popular that people were building jeans around them. I mean, that was it was something that the sport, and certainly the sport, but the country had just never seen. There was like some mystique to it, especially around Bill Wallace and Chuck Norris. Those were the two people featured in most of those ads.
So what is whether it's either something Century maybe had or just something that was advertised on Black Belt, what's the craziest martial arts product you remember seeing? Anything jump to your...
One thing I always thought was a little bit reckless was board holders.
Oh, yeah.
I know that seems really weird, but the idea that you're going to get these mechanical arms and mount them to the wall and they're going to hold the board, it just seemed like we're selling this liability of like someone has got to kick this giant piece of metal and break their leg, or like a little kid or something. So for me, that was always what I was like, why are we selling this? Because is the replacement just a person holding it? But I understand the need for it. It's just one of those things where I see this. You see this elaborate contraption to do such a simple task. Sometimes you're like, this seems over-engineered and very expensive. But when there's a will, there's a way, and sometimes that stuff works. So.
I do remember that one. So never got to use it. Luckily,
and there's been tons of iterations of it. I'm sure there still are companies making them. I think we got a lot of people that got hurt from them.
That's funny. So earlier in the conversation, you also mentioned you had your first MMA fight, which kind of leads to one of the questions I ask all my guests, and I probably already know the answer since you actually fought, but kind of your thoughts on MMA in general and its impact on the martial arts world.
I think I have a unique probably perspective on the impact. I think that it's very polarizing, and that I think it's naive to say that it hasn't done good for our industry, but I also see the argument and I see how people can say that it's done harm, because it has polarized people to think that martial arts is MMA. And we all, I think, know is if you are a practitioner of martial arts of any style, you know that that's not the case. But average person that walks off the street and wants to get involved in martial arts is either very turned off when they walk in and they see a traditional martial arts school, or, they walk into an MMA gym and they're like, oh, this is, they're immediately turned off by martial arts overall. And I think also people very quickly associate this kind of tattoos and beating each other up all the time is what martial arts is all about. And there's probably I know that not all MMA gyms are like that. That's definitely not the case at all. But I do know that, sometimes the bad apples in any situation are the ones that stand out the most, and that sometimes those get brought to light in the MMA community. So it's kind of creates the situation where I think the moms and dads of the world are less excited about getting their kids involved in martial arts because that's what they think the end result will be. And that's fortunate because that's just not the case at all. Right. As far as MMA, I mean, it is just that it's mixed martial arts. So the other thing is that people don't always take into consideration, if you're doing MMA, you don't just go to MMA class or you should. I mean, some gyms have that, but right. You really should be doing boxing for stand-up. You should be working wrestling or judo for your takedowns, and then you should be doing jiu-jitsu on the ground. But the evolution of what MMA has become, it still is it's got its own place, and I think it forever will. And it will kind of be that. It will help light the fire for the years to come to continue martial arts and the evolution of and bring all the other arts with it, hopefully.
And what led to your decision to step into the cage for your first MMA fight?
Yeah, so I participated because I wanted to get a fight on my belt. One, to kind of go out there and say, look, I do traditional martial arts and I can beat you guys up. Just you guys think you're all tough just because you do MMA. Like I do Taekwondo. Watch this. It's still applicable because I think that a lot of the MMA community does sometimes shun the traditional martial arts people, and they're naive to think that traditional martial arts is not applicable to MMA, because I think it very much is. But then also I just wanted to check that off on my list of things that I could say I've done as a martial artist, and I don't know. There's something to be said whenever you get accomplished that task and that goal. I'd feel pretty good.
And I myself also have a background in traditional Taekwondo, and I kind of just thought of another question that I wanted to ask you just when you mentioned it. Now, kind of your thoughts on, with Taekwondo getting into the Olympics and stuff, do you think that hurt traditional Taekwondo schools?
It depends. Olympic Taekwondo is interesting because it's gone so down this I call it a rabbit hole, but like it's gone such a niche of just kicks,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it does it justice for what Taekwondo is from an art, like as the bigger picture perspective of it. But anything that showcases martial arts, I think in that kind of mainstream opportunity, it helps feed the industry and feed people participating, at least hopefully gravitates some interest. I'm sure that there are people that look at it and are like, oh, that's not what I thought Taekwondo was. That's kind of a turnoff.
Yep.
But at the same time, I don't know, maybe they hopefully don't make the decision, okay, martial arts isn't for me, but they say, okay, well, maybe Taekwondo isn't something I'm interested in. Maybe I'm interested in this. I do wish that I like that in, karate is now, I guess it is going to be in the next Olympics, and I know that they've been delayed, so it's kind of weird, but they've taken the stance of doing kata and doing and kumite. And I think that's unique to, in at least a great attempt to try and bring in both aspects of karate. So displaying kind of everything that it can be and kind of both sides of that equation. And to my knowledge, they don't do that with Taekwondo. Is that correct?
No, yeah, it's just the sparring for Taekwondo. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to see how they do that. I mean, it'll be interesting because I'm always online defending Taekwondo because I come from a traditional Taekwondo background and other styles too. Yeah. My first style was also Tung Sudo, and I've done Shotokan, but it's everyone hears Taekwondo and their first thought is Olympics. Oh, that's not effective on the street. Well, that's Olympic Taekwondo may not be, but traditional Taekwondo definitely is. So yeah, people just say one-sided thinking. So.
Yeah, it's taken on this persona as Olympic Taekwondo, and it's like, I'm not sure that was even their intention. But anytime you introduce points into anything, I mean, even I do jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. When you go and compete in a tournament, it's just it's not the same. Right. When I train, I recognize that. I was like, am I getting points? This is how I do it if I get points, right? Okay. Well, I want to learn the technique too, and you've got to peel back the layers and at least accept that that's how you're training and that there's time and a place for each of them, but you've got to know that personally. You got to know both. So
right. So what advice would you give someone who approached you that's thinking of getting involved in martial arts and they just kind of want to know what to look for in a school, what to look for in an instructor? I
think anybody who's just interested in getting involved in martial arts, the very first step you should take is researching all the different styles of martial arts. I think all too often people say, I think I really want to get involved in martial arts. They Google martial arts school and they don't understand that that's the blanket title for all styles and systems. And they find the nearest one next to school. And if it's Taekwondo, they do Taekwondo. If it's Jiu-Jitsu, they're just like, oh, I'm going to pop in. My advice to anybody who's just interested in beginning their journey, they should research and find out the difference between the styles and choose what actually sparks your interest, because you're going to have the best experience if you actually go into it with an expectation and an excitement about getting involved in that certain thing. The next would be when you're looking at your instructor in your school, just make sure it's your sense of community, because there really is a sense of belonging and community that kind of gets rallied around your experience as you get into the school. And if that doesn't fit your personality, if it's a little more grungy than you wanted, or if it's a little more uptight than you wanted, then that's not the school for you. There's other schools out there. So there's no reason to make yourself fit into one school just because you think that's the only option. I think there should be a school everywhere in your area, or somebody training and instructors to choose from. So you should do your research and your due diligence before you commit to sign up for a year at a gym and are unhappy with your experience as a whole.
I like that answer. So now this one, you can't say your dad. Throughout your life, is there a martial artist or two that you have really looked up to and admired?
Oh, I've always admired Bill Wallace. It's the kind of the other cop out, but
yep.
Because he can kick and his flexibility is, I've always just been like, man, I just really wish I could do that. But also his record, and when his record is personality, he's not like a showboater. He's a very humble person. I like his outlook on martial arts and how he carries himself as a martial artist. I've always just really, really appreciated that about him. And then the other person who I've definitely looked up to as a mentor, and I like just his approach on things, is John Hackelman. He's a little bit more untraditional, but John also carries himself in a way that's that I think most martial artists should. And he's very accomplished, but doesn't, bring it to light all the time. And he looks at things and is always, he's continuously evolving as well. And I really appreciate about him as an instructor and the way he trains his fighters and looks at self-defense.
Nice. And then is there a martial arts philosophy, maybe one or two different ones that you really kind of have stuck with you throughout your years of martial arts training that you kind of keep coming back to?
We always say here in our classes, and I think everybody should come in with this mentality, but every day is a beginner's mind. And that idea translating into when you train, just like every day you should be open to learning something new. Just because you showed up and I go to jiu-jitsu one night and I've seen this technique 15 times doesn't mean that when I go with the white belt in class, he's not going to not know what he's doing. And I'll be like, oh, actually, that works pretty well. I never thought about doing that. You always have to keep an open mind to the people you're training with and to different techniques and how even sometimes across different styles and different systems, how one thing could be applicable to another art. I think all of that stuff is important to take into consideration and to always be thinking an open mind whenever you're training.
And then do you have a favorite martial arts book, either one that you come back to and read yourself, more than once, or that you continually recommend to other people?
I mean, the Tao Jeet Kune Do, I think that's a default for a lot of people.
Yes, it is.
But there's so many just applications of the way that book is written and the mentality, and that is not, I train a little bit of Jeet Kune Do. Our president at the Century, that's what he specializes in and teaches classes here. But I wouldn't call myself a Jeet Kune Do practitioner in that book, but I can still take elements of that book and apply it to all different types of my training. So people that haven't read that before, or at least looked through it and understood why it's so important to other martial artists, it's something that I think you got to make an effort to do.
And kind of a last 1 or 2 part question, depending how you answer, but if you have a favorite martial arts TV show and or favorite martial arts movie, maybe guilty pleasures or something.
Different martial arts. I mean, I always enjoy my Walker Texas Ranger, I must say. I know that probably doesn't even count.
Have you watched the new one? I'm curious.
The new Walker Texas Ranger? Oh, yeah. I haven't. No, I've heard that came out.
Yeah, it's not. There's not really any martial arts in it, so don't get your hopes. It's a good show, but it's definitely not the original. Yeah,
no, I think. I'll also say I have a special plate in my heart, as many other kids that grew up in the '90s. It's an '80s film, but in the '90s, my generation was so impacted by it. But The Karate Kid is just forever. All different aspects of that movie, and even though it captured for me what it was like to be in martial arts schools during that time. And that's very nostalgic for me. And there's a lot of applications to that. I think that movie of being patient when you're training and kind of these bigger picture things when you look back at it. But I love the fact that they brought it back with Cobra Kai too. That's very cool it's exciting that it gets my son excited about martial arts.
So your thoughts on Cobra Kai? I'm assuming you've watched it.
Yeah, no, I think they did a really good job. I mean, they took definitely the idea of bringing in that nostalgic piece of what's very implanted in everyone's mind with the Karate Kid and bringing that to the new generation. I think they've done a very, very good job.
And then one last one I just thought of, because you mentioned kids. So how many do you have? 1 kid, 2 kids, and are they involved in martial arts at their age right now?
I've got a 3.5-year-old. He's not allowed to do martial arts yet. Okay. Yeah, but only because he actually he's very interested in it, and that's why I bring up Cobra Kai. That he looks at it and he's like, oh, that's what Dad does. I want to do that, and that alone gets me excited. But in my family, I definitely was forced into it. He would not be. I want him to be excited and make the choice when he gets involved. And so he'll be living at the gym, but not yet.
That's good. Same with my kids. My kids all started when they were 5. They didn't have a choice when they were 5, but they got to choose to stick with it. And when they decided to quit going, but all 3 of my kids got to junior black belt in traditional Taekwondo. And my daughter now just is coming back after a 2-year break. And I'm hoping she'll be the first of my 3 kids to actually go for their adult black belt. So fingers crossed.
In our family, you're not allowed to work at Century if you're not a martial artist. So.
Nice.
You don't get the easy layup by any means.
That's good. Cool. Well, Michael, I just want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us and talk about your background and everything you're involved in. Any last minute stuff you want to mention or parting thoughts? Or
no, I really appreciate you, Brian, for having me be a part of the show. I think for anybody who's listening, hopefully I'm not the most aspirational, but I do hope that my journey maybe shed some light on the possibilities that you can do. And I would certainly suggest anybody out there listening to keep at it if you're already involved in martial arts. And if you're thinking of getting into it, then by all means, give it a try and explore it, because it's got a lot of things to offer your life, not just in the skills that you get or staying in shape, but all the tenets of martial arts that come with that. And discipline, respect, responsibility, and courage, and all that stuff is very applicable to your everyday life, whether it be your family, your job, or just anything you have to deal with. The mental aspects are just as important as the physical.
Nice. And I will definitely include links to both Black Belt Magazine and Century Martial Arts in the show notes for the show. So, but once again, thanks for your time. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.